Coming soon to a computer near you. Free internet access.
It's true. Surf the net and never get a bill. Of course, there is one catch. There always is. Welcome back to CNN Today. Also coming up this hour, the United States now officially has its first female Secretary of State.
And the Super Bowl is just 3 days off. Can you say hype? We'll find out what's making headlines in New Orleans. First of all, though, the O.J. Simpson civil suit is nearing an end, and today a familiar player on the Simpson team is spinning a theory that worked well for Simpson in the criminal trial, police conspiracy. The defense attorney, Robert Blazier, is making his final pitch to the jurors. He's recovering from a back operation and had to be wheeled into the courtroom in Santa Monica. This morning, Blazier told the jury that Simpson is a victim of police corruption and planting, and he pleaded with jurors to disregard much of the physical evidence that was used by the plaintiffs to try to tie Simpson to the Brown and Goldman murders. Blazier, you cannot rely on this physical evidence. What was picked up off the ground was not necessarily the same thing that went through the lab. That's what this whole case is about. Policemen, says Blazier, are human. Many are honest, some are dishonest, some are incompetent. We are trying to paint by the numbers, and we have a picture of corruption, contamination, planting, and tampering. It now appears the jury will receive this case Monday at the earliest. The courtroom is dark tomorrow to allow Judge Hiroshi Fujisaki to attend a judicial conference, and the plaintiff's attorneys have yet to begin their rebuttal.
Joining us now to talk more about the endgame of this Simpson civil suit is a familiar court watcher, John Shepard Wiley, professor of law at UCLA. Professor Wiley, thanks very much for coming in today.
Surely.
It is day two of the defense's closing arguments. Let's talk a bit about some of those key arguments made by Blazier today.
Well, the key thing about these arguments so far is that they're very lengthy. In every summation, a trial lawyer's got to think, how long do I want to talk to this jury? How much of their attention can I sustain? Am I going to go for an hour or two? Remember that the plaintiffs in this case argued for a day and a half, and the argument was not redundant or circular. It wasn't repetitive. There is a lot of factual ground that the parties are covering, and it's giving the jury a lot of detail to work with.
So you're saying the defense is making an error here, a tactical error?
Well, the defense is in a dilemma, really. When the plaintiff talks for an hour and a half about, a day and a half about all the evidence, the defense has got to wonder, now, do we try to go back over each of those facts one by one and say, well, that's not the right interpretation and that's not correct either, and thereby go over the whole case again and again? Or do they try to shift focus onto a different theme and then risk the problem of leaving some questions unanswered, which the plaintiffs will point out when they have the last word in rebuttal? It puts the defense in a tough position, and we're watching today to see what they do with that problem.
Well, some of the arguments Robert Baker made yesterday involved several key points. In fact, there's a little catchphrase coming out of what, because he dealt a lot with the timeline sequence and what he considered the impossibility of that. And now the line, if you don't have the time, you can't commit the crime, is coming out of that. Is that a strong key argument?
Well, it worked the first time around, and it is a familiar refrain, and so the defense is going with what worked before. The plaintiffs this time around, though, have attacked the timeline in a very lengthy presentation of their own. They're arguing that there was plenty of time for Mr. Simpson to commit the murders, and in fact, Mr. Petrocelli made much of the fact of how brief this actual violence probably was. So both sides are claiming that the time situation works in their favor.
And what about the argument that O.J. Simpson had no motive?
That, again, is heavily contested ground. The defense is saying it just doesn't make sense that a man this successful would give this all up for a matter that he didn't really care about. But the plaintiffs are strongly arguing, look, this was a yo-yo relationship. Mr. Simpson himself described this as a problem relationship. And listen to that 911 tape. This is a man who in the past had been violent towards this woman, and members of the jury, he did it again. That's their argument. So again, both sides are tussling over very factually detailed claims.
I know you haven't been in the courtroom directly, but talk, if you will, a little bit about the differences between the plaintiff and the defense attorneys in both substance and style in their argumentation.
Well, I have not been in the courtroom. I've been reading the transcript, and it's a very different picture one always gets reading rather than watching. I'm very reluctant to comment on that. It is plain, though, that the plaintiffs, the arguments made by Mr. Petrocelli, have benefited greatly from the fact that there was a criminal trial that he was able to study and learn from. The second time around, he's been able to fill in some of the gaps that the prosecution in the criminal case didn't plug as effectively.
And I know this is also hard to predict, but what would you say is the key to getting to the jury here?
Well, that's something that only time will tell, but we do know that the jurors are confronted here with a mass of physical evidence and detailed claims on both sides. Was it planted? Is it reliable? The jurors are going to have a lot to work with, and the plaintiffs are arguing both rational analysis and emotional impact. That's true on both sides. So it's just foolhardy to look at this case and say, oh, well, we know what the jury's going to do. The jury doesn't even know what they're going to do yet. So we'll just have to wait and see how real life develops here.
Has the fact that new evidence has been introduced in this trial made the case stronger against O.J. Simpson, or can you not assume that?
Well, there has been a dramatic development in the course of trial, and that's the uncovering of another 30-some-odd photos. In an odd way, this sort of parallels the unexpected events that happened with Detective Mark Furman in the last trial. Last time, the new developments about Detective Furman badly hurt the prosecution's case because Mr. Furman had eventually to admit to being a perjurer based on those new developments. That badly hurt the prosecution. This time, there were new developments that seemed to help the plaintiffs. So in both cases, evidence developed during trial that certainly unsettled both sides' strategies.
All right, John Shepard Wiley, Jr., we thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Published reports today indicate evidence in the double bombing at a building in Atlanta is raising questions about the target. The bombs exploded outside a building housing a family planning clinic last Thursday, injuring 6 people. The New York Times reports each bomb contained 10 to 20 sticks of commercial dynamite regulated by the federal government. CBS News quotes investigation sources as saying the first bomb may have been exploded to lure federal agents to the scene as targets for the second bomb. They say the sophistication of the bomb indicates it's the work of an expert. A levee broke last night in Northern California during another powerful rainstorm there. Rising floodwaters forced 3,500 people from their homes in rural Yuba County. The 20-foot break was passed early this morning, and some folks have begun returning to their homes. The battered California levee system will likely be tested by more rain within the next few days. In Minnesota, blizzards continue to make life dangerous and miserable for folks in the Midwest. Hundreds of children were trapped in their schools yesterday by thick blowing snow and dangerous roadways. Schools reopened today, but later closed due to more bad weather moving into the area. In Colorado, hunger is forcing elk to come down into the valleys. The Wildlife Department and some landowners are putting up bales of hay to keep them fed.
Sworn in today as her country's first female Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright called for an active American presence in the global arena. Raised for a time in wartime Czechoslovakia, Albright said her experience was shaped by the turmoil of Europe and the generosity of America. She said the United States of today should not shy away from leading.
If we are complacent or timid or unwilling to look beyond our borders, our citizens will not prosper, and the framework of American leadership and the foundation of American security we have built could crumble with 21st century speed. We cannot allow that to happen. We must not shy from the mantle of leadership, nor hesitate to defend our interests, nor fail in our commitments, nor diverge from the principles that have defined, elevated, and sustained our nation for more than 200 years.
Secretary of State Albright is the scheduled guest tomorrow on CNN's Larry King Live. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific. Well, once Albright was sworn in, the president turned his attention to another matter of international affairs, the United Nations. He met at the White House with the new UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan, and afterward, he said he was convinced that the Secretary General will make some needed changes at the UN.
As the UN moves to reform, it must know also that the United States is prepared to pay its way. In the weeks ahead, I will be working with Congress to reach an agreement through which America can pay our arrears to the UN, meet our obligations, and continue to